I'm known to have a few hot takes on my channel now and then, and Collateral Beauty is a film that I've never spoken about on this channel before, but I've definitely been meaning to because I truly believe it's more of a highbrow story that goes over everybody's head, so much so that they end up hating and, in my opinion, completely misunderstanding it. I've now seen it 3 times, and it's a film that you get more out of every single time that you watch it. We'll talk more about that in a second, but I didn't want to forget to let you all know that I have my buddy Anthony A. Perez joining me to talk about this film. I told him, for God's sake, watch it without watching a trailer because I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts going in blindly. So thankfully he agreed to do that because its biggest issue is undoubtedly one of the biggest cases of false marketing I've ever seen. So let me just assoil all the confusion. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, assoil, to clear up or resolve. Collateral Beauty is ultimately a film that follows around a broken down father played by Will Smith who recently lost his daughter, and for the last 2 years he's been dragging his company down with his consistently depressed attitude, and his colleagues believe that the best course of action here is to send 3 actors his way pretending to be the abstract characters of love, time, and death. So first and foremost, gotta give my buddy Anthony a huge shout out and thanks for joining me in this review today. You've all seen him on the channel multiple times at this point. He'll be providing his thoughts on the film in just a hot second. But first, I wanted to list off some of my positives here, and later on, after Anthony talks, I want to forewarn you that the review will have a spoiler section, just because I really do think that the concept goes over most people's heads. They don't understand how deep it actually gets, so when people as a whole just can't seem to understand the point of the film, I feel kind of drawn to lay it out. Again, the section for spoilers will be after Anthony speaks, so stick around for that if you want to. I actually love this movie. It has its issues, of course, which I will talk about, but I think it has a ton of really good performances as well, primarily from Will Smith, who once again plays an absolutely broken down shell of a man. He really keeps the film afloat with his character's tragic backstory, and the characters of love, time, and death are honestly pretty original all around. The film came out in December, so I think a lot of people were expecting more of a twist on the classic Christmas Carol storyline. Instead of 3 Christmas spirits, you got 3 abstractions, and the trailer suggests as much. The trailers really are very magical, but once you watch the movie, you start hating it because the plot is founded in fraud and deceit. These co-workers, or friends of Will Smith, plan on making him look nuts by hiring these actors in order to finalize some kind of deal in the company. It is so grounded in reality that it's immediately murky when you watch it, and it's disappointing. I get it. It's really sketchy, and they either should have never done what they did in the trailer, or more likely, never took the direction that they took in the film itself, because it completely removes that sense of magic and wonder that everybody wanted to see out of the film. This is when false advertising is so effective when it comes to expectations at the end of the day. Your experience can be so absolutely trashed that you'll miss everything that's happening in the movie that's actually phenomenal. All of which I can't even talk about because of spoilers. So once again, when we come back, I will be talking about spoilers, so stick around for that. But until then, let's hear what Anthony had to say about Collateral Beauty.
What's going on, Dave and all his viewers? Thank you so much, my friend, once again for having me on for another video, this time around for Collateral Beauty, a film that I remember seeing the marketing for on tons of occasions prior to its release, as I was working at a Cinemark at the time. So I remember selling people tickets or selling people popcorn and other snacks as they walked in to go check out this Will Smith film that also has tons and tons and tons of other fantastic actors and actresses in this film. People like Kate Winslet, people like Ed Norton, you also have Keira Knightley in here, Helen Mirren, and many others. Overall, star-studded cast. What really works for me about this film, because I'm going to assume that Dave has already shared with you what this film is all about, and I'm going to get straight into my thoughts, are the performances for the most part. I found myself engaged mainly in the performance and the premise. And the premise in and of itself for me is super interesting yeah, at the end of the day, really, really fucked up. The idea of hiring 3 actors to pretend to be the embodiment of time, death, and love for this man who has essentially lost connection with everything, it's just strange in and of itself. Now, the way it plays out by the time we get to the end of it does give you a better understanding of how things played out. But just the basic premise, the thing that, you know, starts this story up, the things that gets things moving, ultimately it was a strange premise to follow, I think, when it comes to the characters. It just was a really messed up thing to do to this person who lost their daughter. Now, with that said, again, it comes full circle by the time you get to the end, so there is, you know, a bit of you being able to say like, okay, cool, this was supposed to happen, not only for Will Smith's character, but for everybody else's character. And that was part of something I enjoyed about the film. I was a little bit torn overall on how the premise starts out because it is such a horrible thing to do to somebody. But with the way it plays out, I found myself enjoying it a little bit more, especially with the final moment of the film giving you a lot more context as to what you've just been watching this entire time. What I enjoyed about this film, that premise though, was the fact that it wasn't only Will Smith that needed healing, that love, time, and death were actually going to be there also for the characters who were hiring them for Will Smith's character. They hired these actors to go after Will Smith's character, but ultimately in the downtime that they had with these characters, they learned a lot about themselves. So I thought it was interesting that the people who hired these actors also had something to learn from these individuals and these entities in life: love, time, and death. I won't take too much more of your time, but what I'll say is overall I found this film to be a well-acted film that has good editing and, you know, overall is a competently well put together film. But I did find myself at times feeling like there were certain parts of the story that felt a little bit hollow. Some of the characters weren't really fully realized to me. Edward Norton was a weird part of this movie for me because I think he's a phenomenal actor and I usually love him in anything he's in. Maybe it was the writing, maybe it was the performance, but I wasn't crazy about his character here in this movie. Now, of course, the movie in and of itself doesn't necessarily want you to be crazy about him in the earlier part of the film. You're supposed to kind of feel a distance from his character. But yeah, you know, I've never really found myself super in love with all of the characters in this movie and the way that they were always portrayed. I did enjoy the overall journey by the time we got to the end, but if I'm completely honest, I don't know that this is a movie that I'm rushing to rewatch anytime soon. I think the standout performance here, without a doubt, is Will Smith. We already know he's great at really broken, sympathetic roles, and so you definitely have that going on here. As for everybody else, again, this is a movie about multiple people having to kind of overcome something in their life. In the case of Will Smith's character, it's the loss of his daughter, and there's a whole thing that goes on in the film with Naomi Harris's character in here that there's a big reveal of at the very end that I'm not fully sure works for me 100%, but I did enjoy it. And overall, what I could say about this movie is I wasn't crazy about all the characters. I wasn't crazy about every moment of dialogue. I wasn't crazy about the entirety of the movie, but the premise and the performances kept me engaged enough to kind of see where it would go. And ultimately, by the time it was over, I thought that's a pretty interesting watch. If you can't tell, I'm a little conflicted on it. It's not a movie that I can say, oh wow, I thought this was great. I thought this was a good movie. Go check it out. But it's also not a movie that I think is a bad movie or a horrible movie or a movie that is not worth checking out. I checked it out on Netflix. That's where it's currently at in terms of streaming. I'm sure you can find it in other places. But yeah, Collateral Beauty, not a bad movie, not a terrible movie, but for me, not a fantastic movie. I think there were elements in the script that did hold it back from being a great movie, but there was a lot about this film that I really enjoyed, so I will say I still had a good time watching it. So a big thanks to Dave for having me on for this one, and hand the floor back to you, my friend.
Thank you to Anthony once again for joining me in this review. I've left a link to his channel in my description box below for y'all to check out. Send him some love. Tell him who sent you. I'm just glad that you didn't hate it, but I feel like the fact that you didn't watch the trailers right before watching the movie, instead of disappointing you, man, I think you ended up having more of kind of a bland time with it. As you said, you're not clamoring over yourself to see it again. You're not really sure why some of the biggest names are in the movie in the first place, so on and so forth. I find that really interesting because you didn't go into the film with high expectations based off the trailer, so it couldn't disappoint. But it's interesting to see your experience going in mostly blind anyway. It's pretty interesting all around, but as promised, I will now be talking about spoilers for Collateral Beauty, so if you have not seen it yet, please pause the video, come back after you watch the movie. If you have seen it or you don't really care about being spoiled, watch away. So, you learn by the end of the film that these actors aren't really actors. They actually are the abstract characters of Love, Time, and Death. And from the beginning of the film, there's constantly hints that they are just that. When Edward Norton first meets the character of Love, she's waiting to audition for a commercial. But after they talk for a second, she leaves without ever auditioning, suggesting that she was never there to audition in the first place. She was there to suggest a tagline for the company that hits him in the feels, signaling to her heart. Why? Because she's actually Love. Not only that, but each character has a very specific connection to each of Will Smith's character's colleagues. Love is attached to Edward Norton's character, and whenever you see them together, you can see that he's very drawn to her. She's also challenging his love for his own daughter. The character of Death hangs out with Michael Pena's character, who from the very beginning, you see him having coughing fits around her. We later learn that he's dying, and this character of Death starts to be his assistant on how to deal with his own impending death. The character of Time, he's basically assigned to Kate Winslet's character, who has subtly been having anxiety over her biological baby-bearing clock. And you see this right in the beginning of the movie, when you see him talking to her about Will Smith's character, but he's also holding a baby pamphlet. Will Smith in this movie, his character is essentially this film's version of sleight of hand. You think it's all about him, but it's not. He was already on the right path to get back to where he needed to be. These three abstract characters were always going to help nudge him, but he wasn't their mission, nor was he ever. His colleagues were, and it's their dynamic in the film that I think is beautiful. You shouldn't be mad at this Edward Norton character hiring them to manipulate Will Smith's character in the first place, because he didn't really. Love, Time, and Death planned that out. That's why Love was at that audition and peeled him away. She gave him the idea of hiring them for this mission. In fact, after Edward Norton leaves the theater where these abstractions basically live, Death puts her hand on Love's shoulder and says, "Good job, you," meaning it was their idea all along. The film doesn't do the best job at explaining any of this because it's more highbrow than anything. It doesn't stoop down to explain everything to you like you're 5. It expects you to pick up on it, and most people don't. Basically, at the end of the day, what people expected to see out of the film, they actually got. They just didn't know it. Why are people so gung-ho on hating it? It's freaking smart, man. My only real negative really is the marketing and the fact that it's kind of misleading, but everything else felt strong, like the performances, music choices, editing, dialogue, twists and turns. The more you watch it, the more you get out of it. This is definitely a hot take for me, guys, but I think that this film is freaking great. Here's my end score. An A- letter grade with a final score of 88%. Don't ask me why the movie logo is in another language. I don't know, but who cares? The point is the movie's good. It's very, very, very good, and definitely something that I'd suggest you try again if you've already watched it in the past and didn't like it. There's more under the surface. Just pay attention. Anyways, that's it, guys. If you have seen Collateral Beauty, what were your thoughts about it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when I come out with a next review. And until then, peace out.